Hello, everybody. Welcome to our conversation with Nathan Alan Davis. We're going to get started in a couple of minutes. I'll just let uh, more audience members drift in before we get started. We're going to be doing this conversation hopefully as primarily an audience Q&A. I'll start off. I have a few questions to get our conversation started. But I would really like to hear a lot from everybody in the audience. The way that we're running the Q&A is to use the Q&A chat box. So if you look down on your little menu bar down at the bottom of the screen there, you'll see next to the raise your hand, it says Q&A. So if you click on that Q&A box, it will bring up a little dialogue and you can ask questions in there. And then I will go through the questions and ask them of Nathan. That way, if we have repetitions and things like that, I might combine a couple of them together or things like that. But we'd really like to have your questions this afternoon. So I think we've got enough people in here to get started. So Nathan, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, that was I found that episode really moving. Just hearing the actors and that feeling of like being absent from the stage and absent, not so much from the stage, but from the audience and that give and take and that back and forth that they get from the audience. I found really powerful. One of the things that we ended with you reading the lost monologue from Nat Turner in Jerusalem, and I thought that was a really fascinating moment for me, where you have this play that's an incredibly successful play as a work of art, and yet you've got this standalone monologue which is also quite successful, as we saw from the reading there. And I wonder, can there's that famous phrase of like killing your darlings as an artist and trying to make the work be the best it can be, with all the parts working together to make it so, and then having to remove something that is good, but doesn't work for the thing. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that editorial process that led you to have to cut that monologue out.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think that the way that monologue began, I was really, I guess, connected to the idea of Nat Turner as a martyr. And when I read the Confessions of Nat Turner, the historical document, the way that Nat Turner was sort of presented in that document was that he was entirely committed to his action, and even in the face of death and of the defeat of his uprising and everything, he was still, to his last moments, saying that he believed this was the work of God and he was meant to do it, and even Christ was crucified, and so he didn't see that as he didn't see even defeat as proof that he was doing anything wrong. He felt like he was vindicated in his actions, and so I guess my initial connection to that through my own religion is the Baha'i faith, and in that tradition, there, like most religions, there's stories of martyrdom and of spiritual ecstasy and all these things, and so I was connecting to that aspect of Nat Turner, I think, when I was writing that monologue, and so it was really about his desire to meet his maker, and so as a piece, I felt connected to it, and I think something truthful came out of that for me. But then in terms of sustaining an evening of theater, the question is like, okay, well, if he wants to die and all he has to do is wait, then where's the drama? What's the conflict in that? And it's hard to sustain that over longer than, say, a monologue, right? And so the question kind of became, okay, well, if we're having a whole play, where do we go from there? You know what I mean? So the new version of that monologue leans in more to the idea that he's facing doubt about his path, which actually would be the worst possible thing that could happen for him, right? Is, oh, what if this is wrong? And that really came from a conversation I was having with Megan Sandberg-Zakian, who directed the production, and she was talking about, a lot of people who are considered saints and all these things talk about having moments of extreme doubt, and for myself as a religious person, I've also had moments of doubt and I have them all the time. So I was like, why not think about that, so it changed the monologue quite a bit, even though a lot of the shape of it was retained, but it was able to then allow for there to be somewhere for Nat as a character to go in the play.
Well, I think Nat Turner is an interesting example, but I mean, and I think some of this applies to your other plays as well, is that, I think you like to take a long view of history when you're approaching things. And, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about, the origins of Nat Turner as a play, and then how you approach that, as somebody who's obviously writing, a work of drama, a work of fiction, about a historical figure, and how you negotiate that the need to sort of imaginatively express what you're trying to express while maintaining a certain amount of fidelity to the historical record.
Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of calibration and recalibration, about how to do that in the process. And I mean, I guess where it started for me was when I read the actual document, The Confessions of Nat Turner. And that document, and part of it is just that I think the time that it was written, but it's written in this kind of a heightened language style where things are, it feels elevated, the way that the language is. And so that was interesting to me, but I think that was more indicative of just the time that it was written, as opposed to like a choice that the writer made. Thomas Gray, who's the writer of The Confession, of course, is a white man, and so there's like not necessarily, you can't assume that his depiction of Nat Turner was like accurate or that it wasn't, But the thing is that about the document that he doesn't really hide the fact that he's embellishing certain things. It's not like, so I just found there was a lot of, to me, it was very interesting just what was there and trying to piece together like, wow, like what happened between these two people that this document came out, That's kind of where my interest was. So then the team at New York Theater Workshop, as we were developing the play, we did a lot of research, and we really wanted to actually, as much as we could, lean into what we knew was factual. And we found that by doing that, we were able to find a lot of really interesting and strange things, and certain details, like, for example, we found out that literally when Nat was captured, literally everybody who owned him or had a claim on him legally was killed. So like he was owned by nobody, right? And like, oh, that's very interesting to think about that, and there's all these different details we found out. But I think what I wanted to do was let it imagine that what was in the play could still have resulted in the confessions document that we have. So it kind of used the actual history as like the bookend, so to speak, right? But then, was free to imagine what this conversation might be like. And the conversation itself is fabricated. So the two of them, Nat Turner and Thomas Gray, had interviews, but the one that is in the play is the night before Nat Turner's death. So I was kind of free to imagine what would that be like if he visited him the night before the execution. And so that was kind of my approach to that.
So we have a question from the audience from Esteban Escobar asks, was the reading with the actors written just for this performance, or was that part of an existing or upcoming work? I'd love to know more about the context of that story.
Thank you. Yeah, that was written just for this performance. And I think one of the things that, as I was thinking about what I miss about theater, a lot of it is just being in a room with actors and that sort of first exchange of energy and ideas when you let a script kind of, be shared around the table and hear people respond to it. And so I was thinking of these particular actors, and I wrote the script, and I didn't have a plan as to like what the story would develop into. I didn't have any particular desire other than to write something for these people to say. And so it was a lot of fun to do that. and I felt a lot of freedom in just exploring what that might be. And I think I might want to develop the script more. I've talked about that with the actors too, and they're excited about it, but there's no particular plans as of yet.
So maybe you could talk a little bit more about that. Like, when you're developing a play, how much does, hearing an actor read your words influence like the next draft? And how much does, directorial choices, even in like a staged reading, affect the way that you approach, the next rewrite and the next rewrite and the next rewrite?
Quite a bit, I mean, I really feel as if theater, dramatic writing, it's just inherently collaborative, so even if I typically do a first draft by myself, I don't usually write although sometimes I write in increments because I can't quite get to the end, and then I'm like, okay, we have to do this. But even if I'm writing alone, I'm still imagining people speaking it and reading it, so it's always in the context of at least an imagined collaboration. Um, and and then yeah, having those conversations. It's not always about the conversations afterwards. That's part of it, but it's also just seeing what happens in the moment, like sitting down, hearing how an actor approaches it and just what happens to them as they embody the words. That's really instructive as well. And so sometimes the conversation might be illuminating in terms of, especially when it comes to an actor trying to figure out what am I doing here, or things that actors have to do to perform well, like seeing what their process is, that can inform quite a bit, right, as well. But yeah, it's very much just part and parcel of writing for me.
I had a follow up to that. I want to, as you've grown as a writer, do you find that it is easier or more difficult to sort of let go, to listen to the way your actors read or listen to the direction? Do you find that like when you were younger, it was harder for you to let go of certain lines or passages? Do you find it easier now to do that, or do you find it more challenging?
I hope I'm answering this correctly because I'm not totally sure, but I think when I was younger and starting out, I was maybe too quick to let go of things, like wanting to show that, oh yeah, I'm a good collaborator, and maybe not being quite as confident. So if somebody said something wasn't working, I might be more inclined to be like, oh, let me fix it. Whereas now, I think I just feel less worried about making sure it's perfect, and using it more as just an assessment, and I've gotten, and also I think taking the time to let comments like sink in. So sometimes somebody might make a comment or a suggestion that might be good, but it might take me like weeks to like understand how to actually incorporate it or if it should be incorporated. And so I try not to change things on a whim or immediately just because of the first impression, and I think it's important not to like get, like realizing that, especially if you've been working on something for, like a long time, like however long it takes to write a first draft, which could be anywhere from a couple months to years or whatever, however long you've been thinking about it or whatever, and then you share it around a table one time, it's a little dangerous to assume that everybody has expert analysis of it just on that first read when you've been working on it for however long, right? And so I think just making sure that I like am open to the feedback, but in a way that's really productive for the piece and not just me trying to look smart or look not dumb, or whatever that is.
So we have a question from Megan. Hi, Nathan. Thanks for a wonderful event. You and your colleagues talked a lot about the loneliness of your time away from the stage. I'm wondering how you filled the space left by live theater during the pandemic, and also if your feelings about that loneliness and space have evolved at all. Were there good things about it as well?
Yeah. I mean, yes, I think I still have not fully come around to, well, we're still figuring out what it's like to like be back in the theater, right? I did go to a play finally a couple of weeks ago, Lackawanna Blues on Broadway, which was amazing. Um, and it felt great. But the idea of sort of, I mean, it's hard to get my head around because it's like, I guess for me, the absence of theater clearly was very necessary during the pandemic, right? It's not as if we need it to survive physically or materially, right? I think putting things kind of in order of importance. Like it was nice, I think, in a way to be like, I don't doubt the importance of art by any means or the importance of theater, but it's also kind of humbling to be like, yeah, this isn't really what the world needs right now. You know, the world needs to keep itself safe. And this is not my time in the spotlight right now. You know what I mean? So I think in that way, it's kind of a relief to say, okay, like let me. It can't do anything, so let me not. You know. And so I did quite a bit of writing, during the shutdown, partially to like meet deadlines and doing kind of development work and stuff like that. Um, but it was, I guess, in a way, it was a relief to not have that production coming up or to be worrying or thinking about when it's going to be produced. And it's like difficult, but nice in a way. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I still don't feel like I know. It felt very good to be in the room with those actors on that day that you saw, in the recording. It felt really great just to have that connection, and that's what I think I miss the most is just having the connection around a piece of theater, whether it's mine or somebody else's. Like that is a wonderful thing, and I do miss it. Um, but I think if anything, it's made me appreciate it more. Having not been with it for a while.
Great. We have a question from Tom. Would you mind commenting on a play from another Windham-Campbell Award-winning artist? I'm specifically asking about Susan Laurie Park's play, Father Comes Home from the Wars. Thanks.
I love that play. That play is amazing. It's one of the best plays that I've experienced. Yeah, I think it's amazing. I don't know I guess I can say that um, the way that play complicates the idea of a hero and the way that play, I guess in a lot of ways it looks at what are the possibilities of heroism for a black man living during the time of slavery or shortly after. And you see all of the ways that the institution, or many of the ways the institution of slavery affects an individual, right? And it's beautiful, it's heartbreaking, it's funny, it's everything a play should be. Yeah.
Another one of our audience members asks, what non-theater stuff is inspiring you right now? Books, TV, world events, current, historical?
Well, let me just answer that as honestly as I can in this moment. I've been following a lot of basketball drama and watching sports a lot.
So you've been,
It's not to say that
by basketball drama, do you mean dramas about basketball or just the drama of
the
basketball?
drama of basketball. Yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot going on. Season just started yesterday. Got people holding out. We got all this stuff going on. I'm a Chicago Bulls fan, and one thing that when I was growing up, and I don't want to sound like shallow, like I don't care about literature or arts, but in terms of things that I've felt I've been turning to recently. I watched the last quarter of the Chicago Sky, which is the women's WNBA professional basketball team. I'm from the Chicago area. They won the WNBA championship over the weekend, and the last quarter was so exciting. It was this packed arena. People were going like just it was a lot. It was amazing, and it reminded me of watching the Chicago Bulls when I was younger, and just the excitement of like this the high stakes championship and just all that stuff. That was really really exciting. Um, so yeah, I've been doing that. I did read recently an essay that I found really illuminating by Albert Murray, The Omni-Americans, which is, it's not a new thing, written in the last century, I believe. But that essay has been really on my mind a lot because in that Albert Murray comments on essentially like what is an American and what are the different sort of like origins, not only like I guess materially, but also like spiritually and like aspirationally that form our identity. And I think it's a really enlightening look into like our national character in a way that I think a lot of our conversations about race and identity don't quite do in terms of like the depth of understanding like where we come from and what we're about and what are the conflicts that have kind of created us. I found that to be really, really great.
It sounds like you've been working a fair amount recently in television as well. You wonder if you want to talk about some of the projects you're working on there, and do you find that there's a tension between working in television and working in theater for you in terms of the way that you approach the work, or just in your sense of where you need to place your priorities?
Yeah, definitely. I'm working on developing a miniseries about Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and that's been um, a, a big endeavor. I wrote a play about Black Wall Street called The High Ground that will eventually be produced at Arena Stage. It was postponed due to the pandemic, but that kind of created an opportunity for me to pitch into this television miniseries opportunity, and I'm also on a staff of a writer's room for a show right now, which is exciting. And it's nice to work with a group of writers on something, like a bunch of writers in a room, all trying to create a story. I mean, there's certain challenges to that, but also it's kind of great to have that camaraderie. Usually you're alone trying to make something, and making something in a group is nice. Um, the process is very different, in television, you really have to um, kind of at all points, you're always proving and like selling your idea, and you're always having to say up front like what you're doing, what effect it's going to have, if it's going to grab an audience or not. Um, and so, in some ways, that's great, and in some ways, that's exhausting. It's kind of both. Um, and I think that it's a very real challenge in terms of balancing television and theater, because while on one hand, doing television work allows you like the financial security that you need to be able to do theater, because theater, of course, is not a typically a very high-paying profession, right? On the other hand, uh, in order to do either of those things well, you have to let them kind of dominate your life. And so I don't think I've figured that out by any means, but um, I just have to kind of take it, I guess, project by project and see how see how it goes. So yeah.
Well, this is a nice segue to our next audience question. What's it like to win a huge prize like the Wyndham-Campbell? Has it changed the way you think about your work at all?
Yes, it is amazing. Sorry, just my phone went off. It has changed my life, right? In a lot of ways. I mean, running an award like this, and it came so much out of the blue that it took me a while to even get my head around like what had happened. um, and uh, it's like I would love to think, or I would love to say, hey, like I believe in my work. I don't need external validation. It doesn't matter. I just do my work. And like, of course, that's how you have to approach your work as a writer, because you can't rely on at any given moment that you're going to get, somebody to praise you or to validate you or to give you money or any of these things. So you can't rely on that. But then when you do get validation like this, it does, frankly, it does, I think, allow me to, I guess, look at myself, or at least look at my work more, maybe more generously. And also, I guess, maybe the confidence that comes from like, okay, I hope that people see this in my work. I do all this work and I hope that it's received. Like that's the one thing that you hope as a writer is like that what you're writing somehow communicates to your audience, your readers, your audience. And a lot of times you just don't know, right? And so to receive an award like this means the world, because it's like, okay, there are people who are listening, who are seeing, and then reflecting back what they see about your work and having it actually be probably in a way, I don't know, much more articulate than me, I would say myself about my own work, right? That is tremendously gratifying, and so it's been wonderful to experience that. Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to wind down maybe with another question or two here, but I was wondering, one of the things that came up in the discussion today with everybody that we recorded last month was that, I think Jack Phillips was bringing it up, was that something about, where do you go from here as a theater artist? What do you feel a sense that like obviously in our personal lives, we feel the ground has changed, beneath us and in ways that we're not even close to aware yet. Are you aware of, any kind of feeling that is driving you forward into the future of your writing, in this almost post-pandemic era?
That is a really good question that I definitely don't feel like I have an answer to. I almost feel as if it's one of those moments in like the world where clearly there's a before and after, right? I mean, we've all experienced this thing. However we've experienced it, we've all experienced something at the same time that's been huge, right? And clearly, we're not out of it, really, right? And so I think where I'm at right now in some ways is kind of wondering, to what extent, even though it's much different now than it was a year ago, right? I don't know what the future is going to be like, you know what I mean, in terms of this pandemic specifically, right? And it seems like we're still embroiled in so many of the same conflicts that we were when it all began. And so I guess for the most part, it seems like the world is more awake than it was to certain things. And I guess in a lot of ways more raw, or I feel like it's harder to hide things in certain ways. But I actually don't know what that means fully for my work. I think some of the things that I was writing prior to the pandemic still feel to me just as urgent as they did before, and unless I feel like, okay, well now I need to adjust them, or I feel like it's, if anything, the state of the world will prove how relevant this really is, right? As opposed to me trying to steer it in a way to somehow like, but I'm sure that the things that I write in the future will, of course, be informed by the world we're in. And yeah, there's even thinking about like one of the practical things that comes out of this even is like thinking about we're doing TV stuff. If I'm working on something that's actually set in the present, one of the conversations people are having is kind of like, so do people wear masks? Like, are we doing like present, but like pre-COVID, or like some alternate view of the present where it didn't happen? That's actually to me like one of those things that I don't even know what to make, because obviously when you're creating TV or theater, you're not actually recreating reality. You're creating a version of reality that is an audience can dip into. But yeah, how do you deal with that? I think that we're in a lot of ways figuring that out. So.
Okay, we have another audience question that came in. Earlier, you mentioned being a person of faith and wanting to take that religious faith plus doubt seriously in your work. I could be wrong, but I feel like that might be a sort of rare thing in theater. So I guess my question is, what's it like to be an openly religious playwright who also makes theological questions central to their work?
Wow, that's a very good question. Yeah, I guess a lot of the way that I experience faith, as I said, I'm a member of the Baha'i faith. I think because that Baha'i faith is not a religion that is maybe as familiarly known or as popularly known as Christianity or Islam, there's maybe more mystery behind it in a certain way. Like, I don't think people have preconceived notions of, oh, I have a connotation for what that is in my life. So in some ways, it's maybe offers more freedom in a way. But I guess a lot of the way that I experience faith really is, I guess, in the level of mysticism, of like thinking about what is our spiritual reality. And I think trying to convey like religion through drama, I think it's very difficult. I haven't figured out what that really means or looks like. So I think it's more about, I guess for me, it's about like recognizing that we have a spiritual dimension to our human reality. Like I take that as a fact from my understanding of the way human beings are, right? And that's informed by my faith. But spirituality is difficult to define, and it's not necessarily one fixed thing. I just think it's important to recognize that, like, yes, we have wants and needs and fears and hopes, all these things, but we also have this other thing, to us. And so I guess what I think it's important for me in my work to just recognize that. And it doesn't mean that every character situation has to do with religion per se, but it just kind of has to do with my worldview and what forces I think are operating. And yeah, I haven't come up with like a specific, like one single way of doing that. I think it's more about trying to apply some spiritual principles to whatever I'm working through, and just including that, and because I think in general, where I feel much happier when I'm acknowledging my spiritual side and not only thinking about all the things that I can touch, taste, smell, etc.
Well, Nathan, thanks so much. It's been great talking to you and getting to know you over the last few months here. We're really excited for you and excited to see the work that you do going forward. And I'd like to thank everybody in the audience for coming. Also let you know that we have 3 episodes left. Next week, same time, we have Kate Briggs. And then our final prize recipient episode will feature Dion Brand in 2 weeks. And then in 3 weeks, we have our keynote lecture by U.S. Poet Laureate Joy Harjo. And I hope you'll all join us for that, as well as for a Q&A with Joy Harjo afterwards. Also, if you look in the chat box there's a link to a Google form. And if you click on it and give us your address, you'll get a free copy of our special issue of the Yale Review featuring this year's prize recipients, including written work by Nathan and others. So we're offering that up to anybody who shows up to our live events. Last announcement is today we experimented for the first time with co-live streaming this on YouTube, so that people who want to watch this on their phones and other devices that are not desktops can do so. So if you keep an eye out on our Twitter feed, the day of the event and going forward in our newsletter, you'll see a link that's just to the YouTube, or you can visit the Windham-Campbell Prize YouTube channel to find the link to the live stream of these events. So you'll be able to do that going forward. So that's all for today. Nathan, thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.